Good evening. We are live. I've got Mark here from Shooters, Fishers and Farmers. Thank you, Mark, for joining me. We're going to have a quick update on what's been happening in Parliament, particularly with the Honourable Minister Rose Jackson. Mark, if you can just lead us down what happened in the lead up to, what happened in Parliament and what's happened since then, that'd be great.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Ingrid. So obviously I became aware of the Reconnecting Rivers program a little while back, and obviously it triggered some alarm bells for me, not only because of the consultation was done so poorly from what I'm hearing from farmers, but just the whole concept around what they were trying to do. So yeah, I sought a briefing off the minister, which wasn't forthcoming, despite requesting it several times. So then I took the first opportunity I had in Parliament, which was last sitting week, to actually put a question to her around this process. And initially the first question was about, well, what's the socioeconomic impact in terms of this projected program? And lo and behold, she couldn't answer that. There's been no work done in that space. So then, which begs the next question: well, how do you then enter into landholder negotiation in terms of compensation when you don't know what the impact is going to be on those farmers financially? So there's some problems there straight away. I was given the opportunity to ask a supplementary question, and my supplementary question was around, well, how much money was given to LLS to manage the initial, as she called it, dialogue with landholders, and she openly admitted that it wasn't a well-conducted process, and which then begs the question: well, if it wasn't done well, that initial dialogue or that initial consultation, why are you proceeding to the next stage, which is you looking to compensate landholders or discuss compensation? You should really be going back to the drawing board. So I guess that's where we left it with the minister. She then has since approached me and wants to have a sit down and have a proper briefing. But I'm aware that it's probably not going to happen until next sitting week, because all the senior public servants are now out there panicking, running around the countryside, trying to hold these consultation sessions that the local land services should have done properly back in 2022.
Yeah, it's been a real mess. LLS have been caught in telling people things that perhaps aren't true. In actual fact, Wednesday Wagga meetings, there was a comment made by the DPIE personnel that there is a lot of misinformation floating around out there, and that has come from LLS directly.
Yeah, well, that's
so.
If you want to dispel misinformation, you put out good information, and they failed to do that. So they've got really no one to blame but themselves for this all going pear-shaped. First of all, they probably shouldn't have given it to local land services to run as a process. Just personally talking to a lot of farmers across this state over the last 5 years, I haven't heard one of them say one good thing about local land services as an entity or a government agency. So I certainly wouldn't have given them the job of doing it.
Yeah, it sort of makes you wonder who else was in the running for the job, and could they have done a better job? Probably. Well, they only managed to, I think, contact 200 out of 3,000 odd people.
Well, yeah, that's right. And the logical entity for me would, the logical entity for me would be DPI Water. And given that agencies have information sharing agreements, there's no reason why DPI Water couldn't have done it. LLS could have passed on the information or contact information of landholders, and they could have done the work. They're best placed to do the work because it's their project, and it solely fits within the water portfolio. They're managing all the other sustainable diversion limit adjustment mechanism programs, and that's a mouthful. But they're managing all those other ones, and they've been managing the consultation on all those other ones. So why wouldn't they manage this one?
Yeah, there's been a strong outcry from the people who are only just finding out about all this stuff now, and they're trying to catch up. And it's a lot to take in. Like, I've been looking at it for over 12 months, and I still have questions coming up from time to time that I haven't thought about. Do you think there's a possibility that we can stop this process now and do a complete do-over, restart?
Look, I'll be honest, it's probably going to be very hard. You look at all the other projects that fit within SIDLAM, they've all been heavily delayed as well, and there's intense pressure coming from the feds to push all these projects and get on with these projects. And it was probably the last government that dragged the chain on completing these. I know I raised it in last Parliament with the Water Minister and showed them how they were 2 years, 3 years behind, and the end result was going to be potentially water buybacks if they didn't pull their finger out and get on top of these projects, which they never did. And now we're talking federally about buybacks. So I think the reason why New South Wales is probably so headstrong in trying to push this through is because they don't want to have that uncomfortable conversation about buybacks. I think they're trying to avoid it.
They're already buying back water right now.
Yeah.
And the ads for the water buybacks are like half a page newspaper ads. But the adverts for Reconnecting Rivers and Landholder Negotiation Scheme, nobody seems to have seen them.
No, I can't find anyone that has seen any information around this project, whether it's been in advertisement, in papers, or in their personal email inbox. As I said, the first I heard about it was when it was raised with me a few months back, and I started looking into it, and it was pretty shocked at what they were proposing. And like you, I've got a whole series of unanswered questions, or questions that I keep thinking about going, okay, well, there's another one. Like there's issues around people that have got their properties under a mortgage. What happens if the value of that property drops? Most banks have a clause that they'll foreclose on a property if the value drops by a certain degree. So that's a concern.
I can see carnage coming on the river when it comes to bank loans and so on. It's going to be like a snowball event. Not only will the easements knock our land values down, but on top of that, you'll get mortgagee and possession sales happening all along the system, further devaluing properties as fire sales happen.
Yeah, and it'll become a cascade effect. There's issues about what these easements really mean. Are they going to be permanent enclosures? Do they really need to do an easement for what they want to achieve? Is another question. Like, could it be handled in another way?
They've sort of admitted that there's other ways to do it, but that easements are their preferred option. I'm a big campaigner for no easements, no way, because it is for perpetuity. Like the decisions we make now will affect generations to come. And like you say, there's just so many questions surrounding the easements and what they are actually going to be used for. You have to ask what's happening if they're not being honest with us now into the future. What is going to come out of it? To me, to me, I think it looks like an environmental asset that the government will hold. And when you talk assets, you talk something that's saleable. So, down the track, are they going to sell that asset to somebody else? And we've got no control as landholders over who they then sell that on to.
No.
Yeah, so that there was a comment made that they could change the conditions of that easement as well. So we had mentioned biosecurity risk in that the floods will bring down rubbish and deposit rubbish on people's properties. And the comment was made that they could change that condition in that easement to enforce that landholders had to clean up any rubbish that was washed onto their place. Might not be rubbish from other farm landholders. It might be, rubbish from fishermen or rubbish from the town up the stream, but we're going to wear the brunt of the costs and everything to keep the easement clean. And what is the penalties if we don't? We have no idea what's coming.
Yeah. I think farmers are right to ask the question, well, what are the other options besides easements? You say that the government says easements is their preferred model. Well, show us what the other models are. Show us what analysis you've done on the strengths and the weaknesses of all the different models, and let us be the judge as to whether easements is the best model. I suspect easements is the best model for the government because it's easier for them.
Yeah,
not necessarily better for the farmer.
Well, it's definitely not good for us.
No, and I think you're right.
And
you point out.
Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say you rightly point out that this is a decision that will, pass down to generations if we go down the easement way, and we know it's getting harder to get young people to take up farming, even if their family have been generational farmers. They look at what their parents or their grandparents go through as farmers, and they look and go, well, bugger it, I'm going to go make my money elsewhere. So you add something like this, it's just another reason for young people not to take up, the worthwhile pursuit of farming. Like it just becomes all too hard.
Yeah. So where to next, I guess, is the question. Do you go back and do further questions to the minister? What can we do about this?
Yeah, well, look, I'll certainly be continuing on with the questioning. I do have a briefing set down for a couple of weeks with the senior public servants, so they'll be getting it right between the eyes in terms of those questions as well. So I encourage anyone that is listening to send me an email with all the questions that you want answered. So that includes the ones that you've tried to ask the public servants at these sessions and they haven't been able to answer, or they've come back with a Mickey Mouse answer. Feel free to pass them to me and I'll ask them on your behalf and try and get better answers. If I ask them in the House, they are compelled to answer and tell the truth. And there are repercussions if they don't. So I'll continue doing that. I'll keep getting up on my feet in the chamber and talking about the serious implications that this has, not just for the individual farmers, but for more broadly agriculture in New South Wales and food security for New South Wales. New South Wales farmers talked about this grand plan to grow agricultural exports from New South Wales. How's that going to be possible when you deliberately flood, 3,000 farmers along a river? It's and I don't think they've seriously considered the individualized impacts this will have on our different agricultural products, I guess, for want of a better word, that that we have in the state. I know for a fact the minister had no idea that if you leave lucerne underwater for 2 or 3 days, it's stuffed. as a crop. That's just one example. There's probably 100 more, in terms of how this can go bad. So look, I'll certainly keep pushing from my end, but I encourage every landholder to jump up and down and raise an almighty hell, because that's the only thing politicians really care about, is when their seats are threatened politically. So if this is going to hurt the government politically to do it, they're going to think twice about it. So that's what they need to feel.
Yeah. We've also got a bit of a movement happening on a local level. So within the councils, Monday we did have a motion passed in Wagga Wagga City Council. I can say that the councillors were pretty horrified that they had not had any consultation on this. The word from the DPI was that they had been consulting with councils, but only with the bureaucrats that sort of mattered. The councillors, I think, were disregarded entirely as being, not worthy of having the conversation with, which I think is absolutely dreadful.
So the people that were democratically elected to represent the community's views weren't worthy of being informed or consulted. That's disgraceful. And councillors should have been consulted, and councillors should have been consulted, because it's not just the farmers that will be impacted by this. There's council infrastructure that may end up being flooded, local roads. We know local councils are struggling already with repairing roads from flood damage, and we're going to deliberately exacerbate floods. That's the other thing. The old saying that weatherman gets the weather right, they just mix the days up. Like, what if they get this wrong? What if they think it's going to be a 30 mil rain event, and it turns out to be 100 mil or a 150 mil rain event? Like, that's just another way this can go pear-shaped.
Yeah, they don't have any answers for that one either, because that's a question that's been coming time and time again from residents around the Riverina. What if you get it wrong? There's been a number of floods in the past that they have got it wrong, and it has been devastating. Yeah.
And who's responsible?
So I think we need to. Who is responsible for that? How do you know if it's environmental water or just general rainwater that's done the damage? And the compensation. There's no talk about that. Nothing.
No. And
so
we know,
how can you have a plan like this?
Yeah, and they reference the Just Terms Compensation Act, and we ran an inquiry into that act last Parliament through one of the committees I was deputy chair of, and by the end of it, it was clear what happens in one of these processes where the Just Terms Compensation Act comes into play. The government just comes in and lowballs the landholder and says, well, this is our offer, suck it. Or go to the Value General, who will lowball you as well. It's never fair replacement value on the property that you've lost. You can't go out and replace it, to a similar standard. It's a terrible process. I wouldn't wish it on anyone. It's driven people to suicide. But no government of any persuasion seems to have an appetite to fix that act, because both of them can use it to their advantage and to the disadvantage of landholders.
Yes. So it looks like they're actually doing a review on that act right now. Do you know what the process is going to be? When will we know what changes they actually want to make?
Look, they should, if it's a statutory review, there should be a publication of I guess a consultation report or a report of their findings all their conclusions, and then there'll be a process of them drafting legislation to make those changes, or if it's regulations that they want to change, it'll be drafting regulations. So it's I guess a case of keeping a watchful eye and a watching brief on their websites regarding that process. But when it comes to a piece of legislation, sometimes they're really good in giving us advance notice on the details of a legislation they're bringing, and sometimes it's, you know, the sitting week that they're bringing it up, they will present it to you and say, here it is. So there may be a need to mobilise pretty fast if the changes they want to make to that legislation aren't appealing.
Do you think that's by design? Do you think that they sneak it up on you?
Absolutely. That's politics, unfortunately. Not everything is done in good faith and hunky-dory. There are games that are played, and both sides have been guilty of it, and neither side is better or worse than the other. So it's just what we have to live with, unfortunately, as opposition and crossbench politicians. We just have to expect that that's what they're going to do and be prepared for it.
So that will go to a vote at some point in the future, do you think, within the Parliament?
If it comes in the form of legislation, yes, it will. If it comes in the form of regulation, which I guess for layman people is, I guess, the mechanics or the how-to of legislation, it doesn't go to a vote. It's designed by the department. It's gazetted, and then people like myself in the upper house have 15 sitting days to move a disallowance motion, which is if we don't like it, which is a fairly blunt instrument. It basically means you wipe the whole regulation for that area. So it's not something that you do lightly, because then the whole issue around just terms compensation would have no regulations, and it's sort of in limbo. It goes back to the status quo. So it's not something that you do or you take lightly as a member of Parliament, because it is a fairly blunt instrument, and it's not really the best outcome. But if need be, and it does force a reset for the department. So it can be used, but ideally we'd want to see it come up in legislation so people can better lobby politicians. We can have some sensible debates. We can amend if things aren't up to scratch. That's the better way of doing it.
Yeah. All right, Mark, we're just about at half an hour mark. So I'll say thank you for this evening, and hopefully we'll get to check in with you when you've got a bit more detail from our Minister, Rose Jackson, at some point in the future. And we'll just keep fighting the good fight, I think.
Yeah, look, absolutely. And as I said, I'll offer again, if anyone that's listening wants to have their questions answered that they're not getting answered by the department, drop me an email, and I'll endeavour to get those answered by the minister or by the department.
Right, great. Thanks, Mark. Check with you later. Thanks.
Thanks, Ingrid.